The lecture hall buzzed with nervous energy as cadets from 17 different species settled into their seats. Station Kronos, the Galactic Naval Academy's premier training facility, floated in the neutral zone between three major star systems. Its massive viewing windows displayed the swirling colors of the Andros Nebula, but none of the students were looking at the view. Their eyes were fixed on the holographic projector at the front of the room. Instructor Velthar stood behind the podium, his forearms moving with practiced efficiency as he prepared the day's presentation. The Centaurian had been teaching xenobiology safety protocols for 43 years, and his chitinous exterior bore scars from encounters that made younger instructors pale. Today's lesson was one he never enjoyed teaching, but one that had saved countless lives over the decades. Deho sat 3 rows from the front, his human features making him stand out among the assembled aliens. He had arrived at the Academy 6 months ago as part of Earth's exchange program, one of only 12 humans scattered across various galactic institutions. His dark hair fell slightly over his eyes as he leaned back in his chair, a relaxed posture that contrasted sharply with the tense bodies around him. Next to him, Mirai shifted uncomfortably. The Valtorian's crystalline skin flickered with pale blue light, a sign of anxiety among her people. She had been assigned as Deho's orientation partner when he first arrived, and despite their different backgrounds, they had become close friends. Still, she worried about him. Humans were so new to the galactic stage, and Deho had a habit of asking questions that made instructors uncomfortable. The lights dimmed. Velthar's gravelly voice filled the room. Today we discuss the apex predators of the known galaxy, not the sentient species who have mastered weapons and technology, but the creatures who need nothing but teeth and instinct to dominate their worlds. The hologram flickered to life, showing a lush jungle planet. Deho recognized the telltale signs of a Class M world, similar to Earth in many ways. Dense vegetation, bodies of water, a thick atmosphere, the kind of place that looked inviting until you learned what lived there. This is Vorsk 7, Velthar continued. 17 years ago, the Galactic Survey Corps sent a team to assess it for possible colonization. 12 soldiers, fully armed with plasma rifles and protective gear. They had successfully surveyed 43 planets before this one. 43 planets cleared without incident. The hologram zoomed in, moving through the jungle canopy. Several students leaned forward. Others who had heard whispered stories about this presentation drew back. They lasted 6 hours. A new image appeared. Deho felt Mirai's hand grip his arm, her crystalline fingers cold even through his uniform sleeve. The creature on the screen stood nearly 2 meters tall at the shoulder. Its body was covered in dark armored scales that seemed to absorb light. 4 powerful legs ended in claws that could grip or tear with equal efficiency, but the head commanded attention. A broad skull housed eyes that gleamed with unsettling intelligence. The jaws, partially open in the image, displayed rows of serrated teeth designed to hold struggling prey. The apex hunter of Vorsk 7, Velthar said. They hunt in packs of 5 to 20 individuals. Their jaw strength can crush durasteel. Their stamina allows them to chase prey for days without rest. Their pack coordination rivals military tactical units, and their aggression toward unknown creatures is absolute. More images flashed across the screen, claw marks gouged into armored vehicles, torn equipment scattered across jungle clearings. Velthar did not show the bodies, but the implications were clear. The lecture hall had gone completely silent except for the occasional nervous shuffle or clicking of alien physiologies expressing stress. Of the 12 survey team members, we recovered remains of only 4, Velthar said. The emergency beacon activated too late. By the time rescue arrived, the apex hunters had disappeared into the jungle. Vorsk 7 was immediately quarantined. No colony, no research stations, no exceptions. The instructor's mandibles clicked together, a Centaurian gesture of finality. There are currently 9 planets under similar quarantine due to apex hunter populations or equivalent predators. The lesson is simple. Some creatures cannot be reasoned with, cannot be avoided, and cannot be survived. Your protocols are to identify, report, and evacuate. Never engage. Never assume you can defend yourself. Never. A hand rose in the 3rd row. Velthar paused, his compound eyes focusing on the human student. Yes, Cadet Deho. Deho stood, his eyes still fixed on the hologram. The apex hunter image rotated slowly, showing every angle of the creature. He tilted his head, studying it with an expression that Mirai had learned to recognize. It was his thinking face, the one that usually preceded something that would get him in trouble. "Sir, that's basically just a big puppy." The reaction was immediate and chaotic. A Draxian cadet barked out a laugh that sounded like grinding metal. Two Valtorians turned completely transparent with shock. A group of Centaurians in the back row began clicking their mandibles in what might have been laughter or disapproval. Mirai yanked on Deho's sleeve, hissing in a whisper that carried further than she intended. "Sit down. What are you doing?" Velthar's forearms crossed over his chest. His voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. "Cadet Deho, did you just refer to a creature that killed 12 trained soldiers as a puppy?" Deho seemed genuinely confused by the reaction. He gestured at the hologram with both hands. "Well, yes, sir. Look at the body structure. Pack hunter. Strong jaws, intelligent eyes, social coordination. On Earth, we have creatures almost exactly like this. We call them wolves. And about 15,000 years ago, we started keeping them in our homes." The lecture hall erupted. Half the students thought the human had lost his mind. The other half wondered if this was some kind of elaborate joke that humans played. Velthar raised one arm for silence, but his mandibles continued clicking in agitation. "Cadet, I have been teaching this course for 4 decades. I have seen the aftermath of apex hunter attacks. I have personally retrieved bodies from quarantine zones. Your species has been in space for less than a century. With respect, you do not know what you are talking about." Deho pulled out his personal datapad, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. Within seconds, he had projected his own images to the classroom display, overriding the instructor's presentation. Velthar started to object, then stopped as the images appeared. A small human child, no more than 4 or 5 years old, sleeping peacefully. Curled around the child was a massive canine, its body easily 3 times the child's size. The creature's teeth were visible even in sleep, and its paws ended in dark claws, but the child's hand rested on the animal's fur and both looked completely at peace. Another image, a human adult running through a park, a pack of various sized canines running alongside, their tongues hanging out in what appeared to be joy. Another image, dozens of different breeds, from tiny creatures that could fit in a human hand to massive beasts that stood nearly as tall as the apex hunters on Vorsk 7. "These are dogs," Deho explained. "Domesticated wolves. We bred them for different purposes over thousands of years. Some hunt with us, some guard our homes, some just keep us company. We have over 300 recognized breeds on Earth. My family has 2 of them." Mirai stared at the images, her crystalline body flickering rapidly through several colors. She had been to Deho's quarters. She had seen pictures of his family, but she had assumed the animals in those pictures were some kind of Earth livestock, not predators. Hanbin, a Draxian cadet known for his combat scores and competitive nature, stood from his seat in the back row. "You expect us to believe that humans keep pack hunters in their homes? With their young? That's either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever heard." Deho shrugged. A human gesture that most aliens had learned meant casual acceptance, probably a bit of both. "But the point is, these apex hunters you're showing us aren't that different from wolves. Same pack behavior, same hunting intelligence, same physical traits. If they're anything like Earth canines, they're not mindless killing machines. They're social animals with complex behaviors. The survey team probably came in with weapons out and aggressive postures. Of course the hunters attacked. That's what any predator does when threatened." Velthar's voice carried a sharp edge. "So you believe you could have survived where 12 armed soldiers died?" The question hung in the air. Deho met the instructor's compound eyes without flinching. "I think I would have tried a different approach, sir." The instructor's mandibles snapped shut with a click that echoed through the silent hall. He pulled Deho's images off the display and returned his own presentation to the screen. "Cadet Deho, your confidence in your species' experience is noted. It is also dangerously misguided. Earth may have its predators, but you have not faced the true dangers of this galaxy. I am assigning you supplemental reading on xenobiology safety protocols. Perhaps studying the death counts will adjust your perspective." Velthar continued with his lecture, moving on to other dangerous species across the galaxy. But Deho noticed several cadets still glancing at him, whispering among themselves. Mirai had released his arm but sat rigidly in her seat, her color shifting between worried blue and confused purple. When the lecture finally ended and students began filing out, Mirai grabbed Deho's shoulder. "Do you have any idea how insane you sounded in there?" Deho smiled, That easy human expression that showed teeth in a way that still made some aliens uncomfortable. Maybe, but I'm not wrong, Mireille. I've been around dogs my whole life. I know pack behavior. Those apex hunters aren't monsters. They're just animals doing what animals do. As they walked through the corridor toward their next class, neither of them could have known that in 2 weeks, Deho would have the chance to prove his theory, and the entire galaxy would be watching the results. The announcement came during breakfast 2 weeks after the incident in Velthar's class. Deho sat in the cafeteria with his usual group, picking at something the food synthesizers claimed was scrambled eggs. They tasted nothing like actual eggs from Earth, but he had learned not to complain. Half the species at the academy ate things that would make humans sick just looking at them. Mireille was reading from her data pad, her crystalline fingers scrolling through the morning briefings. Across from them sat Jiwan, another human cadet who had arrived 3 months after Deho. She was brilliant with engineering systems but painfully shy around anyone who wasn't human. She idolized Deho, following him around like one of those dogs he had shown in class, though she would die of embarrassment if anyone pointed it out. Hanbin occupied the 4th seat at their table, a recent addition to their group. The Draxian had started sitting with them after the Apex Hunter lecture, claiming he wanted to understand human thinking better. Deho suspected Hanbin actually enjoyed having someone to argue with. Draxians were competitive by nature, and Hanbin seemed to view every conversation as a debate to be won. "Listen to this," Mireille said, her voice cutting through the cafeteria noise. "Advanced combat training exercise scheduled for next week. Location is Helios 3. All 3rd cycle cadets required to participate." Jiwan looked up from her breakfast, pushing her glasses up her nose. She wore old-style corrective lenses instead of getting the simple eye surgery, claiming they helped her focus. Deho suspected she just liked how they looked. Helios 3, isn't that the surveyed moon near the Kranos system? Already been mapped completely, Hanbin confirmed. No dangerous predators, stable atmosphere, good terrain for training exercises. Should be routine. Deho noticed the word should and smiled. In his experience, nothing in the academy was ever truly routine. The next week moved quickly through final preparations. Cadets received equipment assignments, reviewed survival protocols, and formed training teams. Deho's team consisted of the 4 of them, which suited everyone fine. They had developed a comfortable working rhythm over the past months. On the morning of departure, Instructor Velthar addressed the assembled cadets in the hangar bay. His forearms gestured at the waiting transport ships, sleek vessels designed to carry 20 cadets each along with equipment and supervising staff. "This exercise will test everything you have learned," Velthar announced. "Navigation, survival skills, team coordination, and threat assessment. You will be dropped in teams at different locations across Helios 3. Your objective is to reach the extraction point within 48 hours. Instructors will be monitoring but will not intervene unless absolutely necessary." The Centaurian's compound eyes swept across the crowd, pausing briefly on Deho. "Remember your training. Follow protocols. Do not take unnecessary risks. Dismissed." As cadets filed toward their assigned transports, Velthar received a message on his communicator. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he read it, and he immediately called for the transport pilots to hold position. The cadets already aboard watched through the windows as their instructor engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with someone. On his comm device, Mireille stood next to Deho near the boarding ramp of Transport 7. "Something's wrong," she whispered, her body flickering pale blue. After 10 minutes of discussion, Velthar disconnected and addressed the cadets. "Again, there has been a navigational discrepancy in the original survey data for Helios 3. It appears the survey team may have confused it with Helios 4, a neighboring moon in the same orbital path. Helios 4 has not been properly surveyed." Worried murmurs spread through the crowd. Jiwan gripped her equipment bag tighter. Hanbin's crest rose slightly, a Draxian sign of alertness. "Academy Command has reviewed the situation and decided the exercise will proceed with modified parameters. Additional security personnel will accompany each transport, and emergency extraction protocols will be active at all times. However, we will be landing on Helios 3 as originally planned, with confirmed coordinates verified against current orbital data." The boarding process resumed, though the excited chatter had been replaced by nervous silence. Deho's team found seats near the rear of Transport 7, strapping into the safety harnesses as the engines powered up. The journey took 3 hours. Daiho spent most of it reviewing the terrain maps on his datapad, while Jiwon nervously checked and rechecked their equipment. Mirai meditated, a Valtorian technique for managing anxiety. Hanbin sharpened his combat knife, the rhythmic scraping sound somehow both calming and ominous. The transport shuddered as it entered the moon's atmosphere. Through the small windows, Daiho caught glimpses of dense forest below. The canopy a mix of purple and deep green vegetation. It looked beautiful and unthreatening, exactly what a surveyed and safe training ground should look like. Then the instruments started screaming. Alarms blared through the transport as the pilot's voice came over the intercom, strained and urgent. Solar flare. Massive electromagnetic interference. Navigation systems compromised. The transport lurched violently to the left. Cadets grabbed their harnesses as equipment bags flew across the cabin. Through the windows, the purple forest spun dizzyingly as the pilot fought for control. Brace for emergency landing. The impact threw everyone forward against their restraints. Metal screamed as the transport skidded through the forest canopy, branches and vegetation tearing at the hull. Daiho felt his teeth rattle as they bounced once, twice, then finally slid to a halt. Silence. Then groaning as cadets checked themselves for injuries. The emergency lighting cast everything in red, and somewhere in the front of the transport something was sparking. The supervising instructor, a Valtorian named Kess, was the first to unbuckle. His voice was shaky but controlled. Everyone remained calm. Emergency protocols in effect. Check your team members for injuries, then prepare to evacuate the transport. Pilot's status report. The response was not encouraging. Primary systems were down. Communication was intermittent at best due to the solar flare interference. And worse, the emergency beacon was damaged in the crash. The pilot was working to repair it, but it would take time. Instructor Kess made a decision. We proceed with the training exercise modified for our current situation. Team leaders, check your equipment and prepare to disembark. We'll establish a perimeter around the transport while the pilots work on repairs. Once communications are restored, we'll determine our next steps. Daiho's team gathered their gear. G1's scanner had survived the crash intact, and she powered it up to check for environmental hazards. Hanbin tested his plasma rifle, satisfied when it hummed to life. Mirai's medical kit was secure. Daiho carried the standard equipment pack plus his personal survival gear, including items from Earth that Academy Supply couldn't provide. They exited the transport into the alien forest. The air was breathable but carried a strange, sweet scent that reminded Daiho of overripe fruit. The vegetation was thicker than it had appeared from above, with massive tree-like plants rising 50 meters overhead. Bioluminescent fungi dotted the trunks, casting a soft blue glow in the shadows. Stay close, Instructor Kess ordered. Teams of 4 establish a perimeter at 50 meters. Watch for, G1's scanner chirped. She looked down at it, then back up at the group, her face pale. Instructor? I'm picking up life signs. Large ones. Multiple contacts moving in coordinated patterns. Kess moved to look at the scanner display. His crystalline skin went completely clear. Something Daiho had learned meant extreme alarm in Valtorians. How large? 2 meters at the shoulder. Maybe more. And there are a lot of them. 20, maybe 30 contacts. Another cadet, a Centaurian named Vex, pointed into the forest. Did anyone else hear that? They all froze, listening. At first, Daiho heard only the ambient sounds of the forest, strange chirps and rustles from unseen creatures. Then it came again, clearer this time, a howl low and long echoing through the trees. It was answered by another howl from a different direction, then another, and another. Back to the transport, Kess ordered, his voice tight. Now. But before anyone could move, shapes materialized from the shadows between the trees. Daiho's breath caught in his throat as he recognized them from Velthar's lecture. Dark scales that absorbed light. Powerful bodies built for both speed and strength. Eyes that gleamed with sharp intelligence. Jaws that could crush durasteel. Apex hunters. Dozens of them. They landed us on the wrong moon, Mirai whispered, her voice barely audible. We're on Helios 4. The creatures circled the group, not attacking but clearly assessing. Their pack coordination was visible in how they moved, each one aware of the other's positions without looking. The cadets and instructor formed a tight cluster, weapons raised but no one wanting to fire the first shot. Instructor Kess activated his emergency communicator, but the solar flare interference reduced his transmission to static. They were cut off, surrounded, and facing creatures that had killed trained soldiers. One of the apex hunters stepped forward from the pack. It was younger than the others, perhaps an adolescent, but still massive and intimidating. It focused on Deho specifically, its head tilting in what might have been curiosity. Hanbin's rifle whined as he charged it to full power. "On your word, instructor, I can take the big ones." But Deho was remembering his lecture with Veltar, remembering the images of wolves and dogs, remembering every nature documentary he had watched as a child about pack behavior and social hierarchies. These creatures weren't mindless killers. They were intelligent social animals, and right now, they were trying to decide if these strange visitors were threats or curiosities. Before anyone could stop him, Deho lowered his equipment pack to the ground and took 3 steps forward, separating himself from the group. "Deho, no!" Jiwan's voice cracked with fear. He ignored her. Moving slowly, he crouched down, making himself smaller and less threatening. The young apex hunter watched his every movement, its body tense and ready to spring. Deho took a breath, then made a soft clicking sound with his tongue, the same sound he used to call his dogs back home. The creature's ears, which Deho hadn't even noticed until they moved, perked forward. He extended his hand, palm down and fingers relaxed, letting the apex hunter catch his scent. Every muscle in his body screamed at him to run, but he held perfectly still. Behind him, he could hear Mirai praying in her native language. Jiwan was crying. Hanbin was cursing in 3 different languages. The apex hunter leaned forward, its massive head moving toward Deho's outstretched hand. Those jaws filled with serrated teeth designed to tear through armor and bone opened slightly. Then it licked his hand. The texture was rough, like sandpaper made of muscle. The apex hunter made a sound deep in its chest, a rumbling that vibrated through the ground. It wasn't a growl. It was almost like a purr. Deho slowly raised his other hand and scratched behind what he hoped was the creature's ear ridge. The rumbling grew louder. The apex hunter closed its eyes and leaned into the touch. Behind him, someone whispered in shock. "By the stars, the human is petting it." The forest held its breath as Deho continued scratching behind the apex hunter's ear ridge. The creature's rumbling grew deeper, a sound that resonated in everyone's chest like a bass drum. Its eyes remained closed, and its massive body relaxed in a way that seemed impossible for an apex predator surrounded by potential prey. Then the rest of the pack emerged from the shadows. They moved as one, a coordinated flow of muscle and scales that surrounded the crashed transport crew completely. Instructor Kess raised his rifle higher, his crystalline hands shaking. Other cadets backed against each other, forming a defensive cluster. But none of them fired. Something about Deho's calm interaction with the young hunter made them hesitate. The pack's alpha approached last. She was enormous, easily 3 meters at the shoulder, with scars crisscrossing her dark scales. One of her eyes had a pale film over it, an old injury that had healed but left its mark. She moved with absolute authority, the other hunters parting to let her pass. Deho felt his heart hammering as the alpha approached. This was the moment of truth. The young hunter was one thing, but pack leaders were different. More protective, more aggressive, more likely to see threats where there were none. He kept his posture low and non-threatening, but he didn't look away. With pack animals, you couldn't show fear, but you couldn't show dominance either. It was a delicate balance. The alpha stopped 3 meters away. Her good eye studied Deho with an intelligence that was almost frightening. She sniffed the air, taking in his scent, then looked past him at the other cadets. Her lips pulled back slightly, revealing those terrible teeth. "Deho, move back slowly," Instructor Kess whispered. "Let me handle this." "No," Deho said quietly. "She's not threatening. She's evaluating. Everyone needs to lower their weapons now. Are you insane?" Hanbin hissed.
"These things killed 12 soldiers.
12 soldiers who came in shooting. Deho kept his voice calm and steady. Look at her body language. Her tail isn't lashing. Her shoulders aren't bunched for an attack. She's curious, not aggressive. But if you point weapons at her, that will change real fast." Mirai, despite her terror, had been watching Deho interact with animals enough to trust his judgment. Her hands shaking, she lowered her rifle. Jiwan followed immediately, her faith in Deho absolute. Instructor Kess hesitated, then slowly lowered his weapon as well. Hanbin was the last to comply, growling his disapproval. "If we die, I'm blaming you in the afterlife." The alpha watched the weapons lower. Her posture shifted subtly, tension easing from her massive frame. She took another step forward, then another, until she was close enough that Deho could feel the heat radiating from her body. Then she pressed her head against his chest. The force of it nearly knocked Deho backward. The Alpha's head was broader than his torso, heavy with muscle and bone, but the gesture itself was unmistakable. It was the same thing his dogs did when they wanted attention or were showing affection. Deho raised both hands and placed them on either side of the Alpha's head, scratching gently. "Good girl," he murmured. "You're just a big sweetheart, aren't you?" The Alpha's rumbling matched her offspring's, a deep vibration that seemed to make the air itself shake. The young hunter, perhaps emboldened by its mother's acceptance, bounded over to the other cadets. G1 squeaked as it approached her, but she held still as Deho had. The hunter sniffed her thoroughly, then licked her face with that sandpaper tongue. "Oh, gross," G1 laughed through her tears. "It's like being kissed by a belt sander." The moment broke something in the group. Fear gave way to amazement as more of the pack approached, investigating the strange visitors with curiosity rather than hunger. Mirai found herself being gently headbutted by a mid-sized hunter that seemed fascinated by her crystalline skin. Hanbin stood rigid as 3 hunters circled him, sniffing at his combat gear. "Hanbin," Deho called out, "you need to breathe. They can smell your stress hormones. Sit down." "Sit down? You want me to sit down surrounded by apex predators?" "Yes, it's a submissive posture. It tells them you're not a threat." Hanbin muttered something unflattering about humans and their death wishes, but he slowly lowered himself to the ground. Immediately, the hunters investigating him changed their behavior. One of them, a hunter with distinctive white markings on its chest, sat down next to him. Then it leaned against him, nearly bowling the Draxian over with its weight. "It's cuddling me," Hanbin said in disbelief. "A creature that could bite my head off is cuddling me." Deho grinned. "Welcome to the human experience. We've been dealing with this for thousands of years." Instructor Kess approached Deho carefully, stepping around hunters who watched him with mild interest. "How did you know this would work?" "I didn't know for certain," Deho admitted. "But everything I saw in Velthar's lecture told me these were pack animals with complex social structures. Pack animals can understand social signals across species if you know how to communicate. Dogs can read human facial expressions better than any other animal on Earth. Wolves can learn to trust humans who approach them correctly. I gambled that these hunters would be similar." "You gambled," Kess repeated. "With all our lives. Would you rather I let Hanbin start shooting? That would have gotten us all killed for certain." The instructor couldn't argue with that. He watched as the young hunter rolled onto its back in front of G1, exposing its belly in a universal gesture of trust. G1, gaining confidence, reached out to scratch its stomach. The hunter's leg kicked reflexively, exactly like a dog getting a good belly rub. "This is incredible," G1 said, pulling out her scanner with her free hand. "Look at these neural patterns. High social intelligence, emotional bonding capacity, even what might be a sense of play. They're not that different from Earth's social predators." The Alpha, still close to Deho, suddenly lifted her head. Her ears swiveled toward the transport and a low growl rumbled in her throat. The other hunters immediately went alert, forming a protective circle around the cadets without seeming to think about it. "What's wrong?" Mirai asked. The answer came as a roar from deeper in the forest. It was different from the hunter's howls, deeper and more guttural. Whatever made that sound was big and angry. The Alpha barked out a command and half the pack melted back into the shadows, moving toward the source of the sound. "There are other predators here," Instructor Kess realized, "and these hunters just put themselves between us and the threat." They heard the sounds of a fight in the distance, roaring, the snap of branches and the distinctive sounds of the hunters' coordinated attack. It lasted less than 3 minutes. When the hunters returned, one of them was limping slightly, but whatever they had fought was either dead or driven away. The young hunter returned to Deho and nudged his hand with its nose. It looked toward the forest, then back at Deho, then at the forest again. "I think it wants us to follow," Deho said. "Follow them?" "Into an unknown forest." Hanbin stood up, dislodging the white-marked hunter that had been leaning against him. "That's too far, even for a human." But Instructor Kess was checking his communicator. "The solar flare is interfering with all our signals. We can't reach the academy or even the other transport teams. We need to get to higher ground to boost our signal." G1 consulted her scanner. "There's a plateau about 8 kilometers northeast. The elevation would definitely help with communication range." The Alpha was already moving in that direction. She looked back at the group and barked an almost impatient sound. The young hunter nudged Deho harder, nearly knocking him over. "They know where to go," Deho said. "They know this territory, and they've already protected us once." Mireille stepped forward, her crystalline body flickering through several colors before settling on a determined purple. "I trust Deho. If he says we should follow, we follow." "I can't believe I'm agreeing to this," Instructor Kess said. "But we're out of better options. Everyone grab your equipment. We move together, we stay alert, and if anything goes wrong, we retreat immediately." They gathered their gear and fell into formation behind the pack. The hunters adjusted their movement, keeping the cadets in the center of their group. It was exactly how wolf packs moved with their young, Deho realized. They were treating the cadets like members of the pack who needed protection. The journey through the forest was unlike anything Deho had experienced. The hunters moved with practiced efficiency, choosing paths that avoided dangerous terrain. They crossed a ravine on a fallen tree that the cadets would never have found on their own. They skirted around a clearing where Jiwan's scanner detected chemical signatures of something toxic. Twice more, they encountered other predators. Each time, the hunters drove them off without letting the cadets get involved. The white-marked hunter seemed to have adopted Hanbin, staying close to the Draxian and occasionally rubbing against him. Hanbin complained constantly, but Deho noticed he had started scratching behind the hunter's ears when he thought no one was looking. The young hunter stuck with Deho, sometimes bounding ahead to explore but always returning. At one point it brought him something it had caught, a small creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a lizard. The hunter dropped it at Deho's feet and sat down, its tail wagging expectantly. "It brought you a gift," Jiwan whispered, delighted. "Just like a dog bringing its owner a ball." Deho praised the young hunter, making the same sounds he used with his dogs back home. The hunter's entire body wiggled with pleasure, a sight both adorable and absurd given that it could tear apart armored vehicles. As the light began to fade, the bioluminescent fungi grew brighter, creating a surreal landscape of blue and purple light. The hunters led them to a sheltered area beneath a massive rock overhang, a natural camping spot that offered protection from above. "We'll rest here for the night," Instructor Kess decided. "Set up a watch rotation and keep the hunters happy, I suppose." The cadets set up their emergency shelters while the hunters settled around them. The Alpha positioned herself at the entrance to the overhang, standing guard. Other hunters curled up near individual cadets, their body heat keeping everyone warm as the temperature dropped. Deho sat with his back against a hunter's side, the young one having claimed him completely. Mireille sat nearby, her own hunter companion snoring softly with its head in her lap. "We're sleeping surrounded by apex predators," she said wonderingly. "And I feel safer than I did back at the academy." "That's because you understand them now," Deho replied. "They're not monsters. They're just animals trying to survive, same as us. Give them respect, show them kindness, and they'll respond in kind." Jiwan was still scanning the hunters, recording every bit of data she could. "Do you realize what this means? If we can prove that apex hunters can be safely interacted with, it could change everything. All those quarantine planets, all those species classified as irredeemably hostile. What if we've been wrong about them?" "One thing at a time," Instructor Kess said, though his voice carried a note of excitement. "First, we need to reach that plateau and get word back to the academy. Then we can worry about changing galactic xenobiology policy." Hanbin, lying with the white-marked hunter sprawled across his legs, shook his head. "I'm never going to hear the end of this. The great Draxian warrior, defeated by belly rubs and ear scratches." But he was smiling as he said it. Dawn came slowly to Helios 4, the light filtering through the purple canopy in shades of violet and gold. Deho woke to find the young apex hunter still pressed against his side, its massive head resting on his leg. The creature's breathing was slow and steady, completely relaxed. Around the camp, other cadets were beginning to stir, each one discovering they had slept safely through the night, surrounded by creatures that were supposed to be deadly. Instructor Kess was already awake. Standing near the overhang entrance with the Alpha, the massive hunter sat next to him like a guardian statue, her scarred head turning to scan the forest for threats. When Kess noticed Deho watching, he gestured him over. "The plateau is about 2 kilometers from here," Kess said quietly. "If we move now, we can reach it by midday. With luck, the solar flare interference will have decreased enough to get a signal through." "And the hunters?" Deho asked, scratching the Alpha's head. She leaned into the touch, that deep rumble starting in her chest again. I don't think they're going to leave us. They've adopted your entire team as pack members. It was true. As the cadets packed up their equipment, the hunters moved with them, each one having clearly chosen a favorite cadet to shadow. The young hunter stayed glued to Deho's side. The white-marked one followed Hanbin like a devoted companion. Mirai had attracted a smaller, sleeker hunter with distinctive ridge patterns on its back. Even Jiwan, who had been terrified initially, now had a hunter that seemed fascinated by her scanner equipment and kept trying to carry her pack for her. The final stretch to the plateau was steep and challenging. The hunters helped in ways that surprised everyone. When Mirai struggled with a particularly steep section, her hunter positioned itself so she could grab its scales and pull herself up. When Jiwan's equipment bag threatened to slide down a loose scree field, a hunter grabbed it in its jaws and carried it to stable ground. They're not just protecting us, Jiwan observed, recording everything with her scanner. They're actively helping us. This level of cross-species cooperation is unprecedented in galactic records. They reached the plateau just as the local sun reached its peak. The view was spectacular, showing the full expanse of the alien forest stretching to the horizon. More importantly, they were high enough that Instructor Kess's communicator showed 1 bar of signal strength. Finally, Kess muttered, adjusting the settings. This is Instructor Kess to Academy Station Kronos. Emergency signal. We have survivors from Transport 7. Please respond. Static crackled through the device. Then a voice, broken but audible. Kess, this is Kronos Control. We've been trying to reach Transport 7 for 18 hours. What's your status? We crashed on Helios 4 due to solar flare interference. No serious injuries, but we need immediate extraction. Be advised we have encountered the indigenous apex hunter population. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. Repeat last transmission. Did you say apex hunters? Affirmative. Multiple contacts. They are currently with us and have been assisting us. Kess, your signal must be damaged. It sounded like you said the apex hunters have been helping you. That is correct, Kronos. We have established peaceful contact with a pack of approximately 20 apex hunters. They have protected us from other predators and guided us to safety. More silence. Then a different voice came through the communicator. One Deho recognized immediately. Instructor Velthar. Kess, this is Velthar. I am ordering you to establish a safe distance from those creatures immediately. We will have an armed extraction team at your coordinates within 2 hours. Deho grabbed the communicator from Kess. Instructor Velthar, this is Cadet Deho. With respect, sir, sending an armed team would be the worst possible approach. These hunters are not hostile. They've bonded with us. If your team comes in with weapons drawn, you'll trigger a defensive response. Cadet Deho. Velthar's voice carried that sharp edge Deho remembered from the lecture. You have no authority to commandeer this communication. Return the device to Instructor Kess immediately. Sir, please listen. Everything I said in your class was true. These creatures behave exactly like pack animals from Earth. They respond to social signals. They understand non-threatening behavior. We've spent the last 18 hours with them and they haven't shown any aggression. They've protected us multiple times. You've been with them for 18 hours and you think you understand them? Cadet, I have studied these creatures for decades. But you've never been this close to them, Deho countered. Every encounter in the records involved armed teams with aggressive postures. No one has ever tried approaching them peacefully. Sir, I'm asking you to trust me. Just this once. The young hunter, sensing Deho's tension, pressed against his leg and whined softly. The sound transmitted through the communicator, was that one of them? Velthar's voice had changed, uncertainty creeping in. Yes, sir. His name is Dubu. Well, I named him that. It's a Korean word for tofu, because he's surprisingly soft despite looking tough. He's been with me since we first made contact. Mirai giggled at the name. Even Hanbin cracked a smile, though he tried to hide it. The young hunter, now officially named Dubu, wagged his tail, completely unaware he had just become the first apex hunter in galactic history to receive a name. You named it, Velthar said flatly. You named an apex predator after a food item. It seemed appropriate, sir. The sound Velthar made might have been laughter or a cry of frustration. With Centaurians, it was hard to tell. Kess, what is your professional assessment of the situation? Instructor Kess took back the communicator. Velthar, as incredible as it sounds, Deho is right. These creatures have shown remarkable intelligence and social bonding. They've treated us like pack members. I would not have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself, but sending an armed extraction team will likely result in casualties on both sides. Then what do you suggest? Deho took the communicator again before Kes could answer. Send a small team, no more than 4 people, no visible weapons. I'll meet them first with Dubu and the Alpha to establish that they're friendly. Then we can demonstrate the safe interaction protocols. Absolutely not, Velthar said immediately. I will not allow you to risk. Instructor, you're going to send a rescue team anyway. Let me do this my way and everyone stays safe. Or send armed soldiers and see what happens when you threaten a mother protecting her pack. The Alpha, as if understanding the conversation, rumbled a warning. Through the communicator, even across the distance of space, that rumble made an impression. Another long silence. Then Velthar's voice resigned. Fine. I will bring a small team personally, unarmed as you requested. But Deho, if this goes wrong, if anyone is injured, you will be expelled from the academy and sent back to Earth. Do you understand? Yes, sir. I understand. We'll be there in 90 minutes. Velthar out. The communicator went silent. Deho handed it back to Kes and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Well, Hanbin said, that was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever witnessed. I still haven't decided which. Both, Jiwan said. Definitely both. The 90 minutes felt like 9 hours. They used the time to prepare, with Deho coaching everyone on how to introduce the hunters to new people. Mirai practiced the calming techniques. Hanbin rehearsed keeping his aggressive Draxian pheromones under control. Jiwan organized all her scanner data into a coherent presentation. When the rescue shuttle appeared over the horizon, the hunters immediately went alert. The Alpha positioned herself in front of the group, her pack forming up behind her. It wasn't an aggressive stance, but it was clearly protective. Easy, girl, Deho murmured, his hand on her scarred head. They're friends. We're going to show them you're not dangerous. The shuttle landed on the far side of the plateau, about 200 meters away. The rear ramp lowered and 4 figures emerged. Instructor Velthar was unmistakable with his 4 arms and Centaurian build. The other 3 were security officers who looked extremely uncomfortable without their usual weapons. Deho could see the moment Velthar spotted the pack. The instructor stopped walking, all 4 arms going rigid. Even from this distance, Deho could see his mandibles clicking rapidly. Okay, Deho said to the group. Everyone stay calm. Dubu, come on, boy. He started walking toward Velthar with the young hunter trotting beside him. The Alpha followed a few paces behind, clearly not willing to let one of her pack approach strangers without backup. Deho walked slowly, keeping his body language relaxed, one hand resting on Dubu's head. Velthar's security team immediately reached for weapons that weren't there. The instructor raised one arm, stopping them. Hold position, Velthar ordered. His voice was steady, but Deho could hear the fear underneath. Deho stopped about 10 meters away. Thank you for coming, sir. And for trusting me. I'm not sure trust is the right word, Velthar replied. Desperation might be more accurate. Dubu sat down next to Deho exactly as trained dogs did. The young hunter's tail was wagging, his mouth open in what looked remarkably like a smile. Behind them, the Alpha watched with her good eye, assessing. Sir, I'd like you to meet Dubu. He's young, probably the equivalent of a teenage human. He's curious, playful, and incredibly gentle despite his size. Gentle, Velthar repeated. That creature could tear me apart. So could a lot of animals on Earth, sir. But they don't, because we treat them with respect and they respond in kind. May I approach? Velthar's mandibles clicked. Slowly. Deho closed the distance, Dubu keeping pace beside him. When they were close enough to touch, Deho knelt down. The key is body language, sir. Lower your center of gravity. Don't make direct eye contact initially. Let him come to you. This is insane, one of the security officers muttered. Probably, Deho agreed. But it works. Velthar, to his credit, did exactly as Deho instructed. He lowered himself, folding all 4 arms close to his body to appear less threatening. Dubu approached cautiously, sniffing at the Centaurian's chitinous exterior with obvious curiosity. Then the young hunter did what he'd done with everyone else. He licked Velthar's face. The instructor recoiled, then caught himself. Dubu sat down in front of him, tail still wagging. Waiting for the response he'd learned meant good things. Scratches, praise, attention. Deho guided Velthar's hand to the right spot behind Dubu's ear ridge. Just like this, sir. Gentle circles. Velthar scratched awkwardly with one hand. Dubu's rumbling purr started immediately, and the young hunter leaned into the touch. The alpha, seeing her offspring's acceptance, approached as well. She studied Velthar carefully, then pressed her massive head against Deho's chest in the same gesture she'd made when they first met. "She's beautiful," Velthar whispered, awe replacing fear in his voice. "All these years studying them from a distance, and I never knew that they were just animals doing what animals do?" Deho finished. "Yes." The security team approached more confidently now, following Deho's instructions. Soon all of them were interacting with the hunters, scratching ears and receiving the rough tongue licks that seemed to be the hunter's favorite way of showing affection. Velthar stood, looking at the entire pack spread across the plateau, interacting peacefully with the cadets who'd spent the last day with them. "Deho, I owe you an apology. You were right. In class I dismissed your insights because I thought experience mattered more than perspective. But humanity's experience with predators gave you an understanding I never had. You're not wrong about experience mattering, sir. But sometimes fresh eyes see things differently. That's not better or worse, just different." The instructor's mandibles clicked in what Deho had learned to recognize as approval. "You've done something today that will change how we approach xenobiology across the entire galaxy. I hope you understand that." Deho looked at Dubu, who had flopped onto his back for belly rubs from one of the security officers. "I just wanted people to see them the way I do, sir. Not as monsters, but as the amazing creatures they really are." 3 months had passed since the incident on Helios 4, and Deho still found it strange to walk through the academy halls and be recognized everywhere. He had gone from being just another exchange student to becoming what the galactic news networks called the Hunter Whisperer. He hated the nickname, but it had stuck anyway. The real changes, though, were happening far beyond the academy walls. Helios 4 was no longer a forgotten moon on outdated star charts. It was now home to the Interspecies Behavioral Research Station, a gleaming facility built on the same plateau where Deho had first contacted the rescue team. Scientists from 47 different species had requested positions there, all wanting to study the apex hunters using the new protocols Deho and his team had developed. Deho walked across the academy quad toward the xenobiology building, his data pad filled with messages from researchers asking questions about animal behavior. Beside him trotted a familiar shape, though it drew stares from every cadet they passed. Dubu had refused to stay on Helios 4. When it came time to leave after the rescue, the young apex hunter had followed Deho onto the transport and simply wouldn't get off. The alpha had watched from a distance, making no move to call her offspring back. It was as if she understood that Dubu had chosen his pack, and that pack included the strange two-legged creature who gave the best ear scratches. Academy Command had debated for a week about whether to allow an apex hunter to live on the station. In the end, Dubu's gentle behavior and Deho's constant supervision won out. Now the young hunter had his own quarters next to Deho's, a specially designed space with reinforced walls and a bed large enough for a creature who could rest his head on a desk and look an adult human in the eye. "Morning, Deho," a Valtorian cadet called out. "Morning, Dubu." The hunter's tail wagged and he made a happy rumbling sound. He'd learned to recognize his name and the names of most of the regular students. Some of the braver cadets would stop to pet him, and Dubu soaked up the attention like a puppy, despite being able to bite through steel. Deho found Instructor Velthar in his office, surrounded by holographic displays showing data from the research station. The Centaurian looked up as Deho entered, his mandibles clicking in greeting. "Ah, Deho, perfect timing. I wanted to review your paper before submission." Over the past 3 months, Deho and Velthar had developed an unexpected partnership. The instructor's decades of xenobiology knowledge combined with Deho's practical animal handling experience had produced a research paper that was causing waves across the scientific community. Reconsidering predatory classification through human domestication models had already been cited in 17 different journals, and it hadn't even been officially published yet. "I made the changes you suggested," Deho said, transferring the file to Velthar's display. "More emphasis on the neurological similarities between apex hunters and Earth social predators." Velthar scrolled through the document, his multiple hands moving across different sections simultaneously. "Excellent. And the case studies from the other quarantine planets? Still waiting on data from 3 of them, but the preliminary results are promising." The creatures on Voss Prime showed the same pack-bonding behaviors when approached non-aggressively. The Kental predators took longer, but they eventually responded to the same techniques. It was true. The implications of Deho's success with the apex hunters had spread quickly. Xenobiologists across the galaxy were revisiting species previously classified as irredeemably hostile. In just 3 months, 7 quarantine planets had been reassessed, and 4 had shown potential for the same peaceful contact protocols. The galactic community was slowly realizing that their assumptions about predatory species had been fundamentally flawed. They had approached every dangerous creature as a threat to be avoided or destroyed, never considering that many of these animals might respond to different treatment. A knock on the door interrupted their review. Mirai entered, her crystalline body shimmering with excitement. Deho, you need to see this. The research station just sent through new footage. She activated a holographic display in the center of the office. The image showed the research station on Helios 4, but something was different. The facility had expanded significantly, and the surrounding area was filled with structures that looked like large outdoor enclosures. Are those pens? Deho asked. Better, Mirai said. Watch. The footage showed a young researcher, a Draxian barely older than Hanbin, entering one of the enclosures. Inside were 3 juvenile apex hunters, smaller than Dubu but still formidable. The researcher carried training equipment that Deho recognized immediately: clickers, treat pouches, and target sticks. Over the next 10 minutes, the footage showed the researcher successfully teaching the young hunters basic commands. Sit, stay, come. The hunters responded eagerly, their intelligence obvious in how quickly they learned. When one of them performed correctly, the researcher rewarded it with treats and praise, and the hunter's tail wagged just like Dubu's did. They're domesticating them, Velthar breathed. Actually domesticating them. Not exactly, Mirai corrected. The research team is calling it socialization training. They're not trying to breed domestic versions like humans did with wolves. They're just proving that wild apex hunters can be safely integrated with other species through proper training and socialization. Deho watched the footage with a mixture of pride and awe. This was beyond anything he'd imagined. He just wanted to prove the hunters weren't mindless killers. But the researchers had taken his initial contact and expanded it into a full program. There's more, Mirai continued. The Galactic Council has officially requested human consultants for their xenobiology programs. They want to establish training centers on 12 planets, all using Earth's animal domestication history as a framework. Deho, they're calling it the Human Integration Protocol. Before Deho could respond, his communicator chirped. The message was from Earth's Interspecies Relations Department, marked as high priority. He opened it, scanning the contents quickly. They want me to join a first contact team, he said slowly. There's a species on the galactic rim, the Kethrans, supposedly impossible to negotiate with because of their aggressive nature and territorial behavior. Velthar's mandibles clicked rapidly. The Kethrans have destroyed 3 diplomatic missions in the last decade. They're considered one of the most dangerous sentient species in known space, which is exactly why they want a human perspective, Deho said, reading further. The message says that every attempt at contact has involved military escorts and armed delegations. They want to try a different approach, one person unarmed, using the same principles that worked with the apex hunters. That's suicide, Velthar said flatly. Deho, you succeeded with the hunters because they're animals acting on instinct. The Kethrans are sentient. They have culture, technology, and a documented history of violence toward outsiders. They also have pack hierarchies, territorial behaviors, and social structures built around dominance and submission, Deho countered. According to this briefing, their society is organized exactly like wolf packs. If they're really that similar, the same principles should work. Mirai grabbed his arm. Deho, you can't be seriously considering this. Why not? Everything we've learned about approaching hostile species peacefully has worked so far. Maybe the Kethrans aren't impossible to negotiate with. Maybe everyone has just been using the wrong approach. The door burst open and Hanbin strode in, followed closely by his constant companion, the white-marked apex hunter, now named Bora after the Korean word for purple, had also refused to leave when the pack returned to Helios 4. The research station had joked that the hunters were establishing an academy pack. Did you hear about the Kethran mission? Hanbin demanded. Please tell me you're not actually thinking about going. I'm thinking about it. That's what I was afraid of. Hanbin dropped into a chair, Bora immediately laying her head in his lap. You know what? I'm coming with you. Everyone stared at him. Hanbin scratched Bora's ears, avoiding eye contact. What? I'm not letting the human who taught me to belly rub apex predators go get himself killed alone. Besides, if you can make friends with creatures that eat Durasteel for breakfast, maybe you can handle some grumpy territorial aliens. I'll go too, Mireille added. Someone needs to document this properly, and my medical training might be useful. As will my technical skills, Jiwon's voice came from the doorway. The young engineer stood there with her own hunter companion, a sleek female they'd named Hana. This mission needs a proper team, not just one person. Velthar raised all four arms in a gesture of surrender. It seems your pack has spoken, Deho. Though I question the wisdom of this entire venture, I cannot deny the results you've achieved. Perhaps humanity's perspective is exactly what the galaxy needs for situations like this. Deho looked at his friends, both human and alien, then down at Dubu, who had been patiently sitting through the entire conversation. The young hunter looked up at him with those intelligent eyes, tail wagging slowly. We'll need to prepare carefully, Deho said. Study everything we can about Kethran culture and behavior. Develop protocols based on what we know about pack dynamics, and we'll need approval from both Earth and the Galactic Council. I'll help with the paperwork, Velthar offered, and I'll provide my full support in the proposal. But Deho, promise me something. What's that, sir? If this works, if you actually manage to establish peaceful contact with the Kethrans, write it up properly. I want to co-author the paper. Advanced Applications of Human Integration Protocols in Sentient Species Diplomacy has a nice ring to it. Deho laughed. Deal, sir. That evening, Deho sat in his quarters with Dubu sprawled across half the room. The young hunter was chewing on a reinforced toy that the Academy engineers had designed specifically for him, strong enough to withstand those powerful jaws, but safe enough not to damage his teeth. Deho's communicator displayed star charts of the galactic rim, showing the location of Kethran space. It was far from Earth, far from the Academy, deep in territory that most species avoided. The mission would be dangerous. It might fail. He might not come back. But he thought about the Alpha Hunter on Helios 4, who had chosen to trust a strange alien instead of attacking. He thought about the researchers now safely working alongside creatures that had killed trained soldiers just months ago. He thought about the 7 quarantine planets being reassessed, the countless species that might be understood rather than feared. Earth had been a brutal teacher. Humans had learned to survive among predators by understanding them, respecting them, and when possible, befriending them. That lesson, learned over thousands of years of evolution on a Deathworld, had given humanity something unique in the galaxy. Not superior weapons, not advanced technology, just a different way of seeing the universe. Where other species saw monsters, humans saw potential friends. Where others saw threats, humans saw misunderstood creatures acting according to their nature. It wasn't bravery or stupidity, though it probably looked like both from the outside. It was just pattern recognition shaped by necessity. Dubu finished destroying his toy and padded over to Deho, resting his massive head in the human's lap. Deho scratched behind his ears, feeling the familiar rumbling purr that had become such a normal part of his life. What do you think, boy? Want to help make some new friends? Dubu's tail thumped against the floor, the sound echoing through the quarters. Deho pulled up the response form for the mission request. His finger hovered over the acceptance button for just a moment. Then he pressed it. The message sent immediately. Cadet Deho accepting assignment to Kethran First Contact Mission. Requesting permission for full team deployment including support personnel and trained companion animals. Proposed approach, non-aggressive pack integration protocols. Estimated preparation time, 6 weeks. The response came back within minutes, faster than Deho expected. It was from Admiral Keiko, the human in charge of Earth's Interspecies Relations Department. Permission granted. Knew you'd say yes, Deho. Your species has a terrible habit of trying to pet everything that might kill you. Fortunately, it keeps working. Full support authorized. Make us proud. And try not to get eaten. Deho smiled and looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Kethrans were going about their lives unaware that humanity was about to try something the galaxy considered impossible. They didn't know that a human who'd befriended apex predators was coming to say hello. They didn't know about Earth's history of turning wolves into dogs, wild horses into companions or deadly cats into house pets. They were about to learn that when a human said, "Here, boy," even the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy might just wag their tails and make a new friend. Dubu made a questioning sound, sensing Deho's excitement. "Yeah, buddy. We've got work to do. Think you can teach some aliens how to play fetch?" The hunter's tail wagged harder. Through the window, the stars shone bright with possibility. The galaxy was learning something important. Humanity didn't survive on a death world by being the strongest or the fastest. They survived by being the species that could look at a monster and see a puppy waiting to happen. And that perspective, more than any weapon or technology, was about to change everything.